We had lived in the quiet neighborhood for almost 2 years. It was the kind of place where people waved at each other and kids played outside until dusk. Our neighbor across the street, Mr. Whitman, was an older man who kept to himself. He was quiet, maybe a little odd, but no one gave it much thought. Then, one day, he disappeared. Just like that. It wasn't sudden, but over time, we realized we hadn't seen him for weeks. His mailbox overflowed with letters, and the lawn began to overgrow. Everyone assumed he'd moved away or was visiting family. But then the police showed up. They knocked on doors, asking about him. The rumors started spreading. Some said he had debts, others whispered about something darker. I didn't think much of it until I saw the van. It was late, almost midnight, when I saw the van pull up in front of Mr. Whitman's house. No headlights, no sound. I watched from my bedroom window as two men stepped out, both wearing dark clothing. One of them opened the back, and the other hurried toward the front door. They didn't use a key, but they were inside within seconds. I should have called the police. But I didn't. I told myself it was none of my business, that it was probably just some family members or hired cleaners. But something felt wrong. I kept watching, heart pounding. After a while, the men re-emerged, dragging what looked like heavy bags out of the house. Big, bulky bags. One of them struggled under the weight, and that's when I saw something, a shape pushing against the inside of one of the bags. My stomach churned. I backed away from the window, afraid they might see me. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, but curiosity got the better of me. I started looking up any news articles or information about Mr. Whitman, but there wasn't much. Just an old man who lived alone. But the disappearances, those were everywhere. In the past few months, people in nearby neighborhoods had gone missing. They were all loners, individuals without family nearby, the kind of people no one notices right away. The police had no leads, no suspects. It was as if these people had vanished into thin air. My pulse quickened. Was there a connection? Could Mr. Whitman have been involved? I felt like I was jumping to conclusions, but there was something nagging at me. I went back to the window, scanning the street. The van was gone, but the house across the street felt wrong, like it was holding a secret no one wanted to uncover. I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I waited until everyone in the house was asleep, grabbed a flashlight, and snuck across the street. The front door of Mr. Pry Whitman's house was locked, but the back door, unbelievably, was ajar. My hands shook as I pushed it open, the hinges creaking like a scream in the silence. The house smelled musty, like it had been closed up for years. Dust covered the furniture, but everything was still there, untouched. It didn't look like someone who had moved away. I crept through the rooms, flashlight sweeping over empty photo frames and scattered papers. That's when I heard it, a faint noise from upstairs. My heart leaped into my throat. I stood frozen at the base of the stairs, debating whether to leave. But something made me climb. Step by step, the creaking growing louder. At the top, the hallway stretched before me, dark and silent. I pushed open the door to the bedroom and froze. The room was clean, but there, in the middle of the floor, was a trapdoor, slightly ajar. Something told me that whatever secrets this house held, they were buried underneath. My hands trembled as I pulled the trapdoor open. A wooden ladder led down into darkness. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts screaming to turn back, but curiosity won. I climbed down, my flashlight barely piercing the shadows. The air was damp, and the walls were lined with strange markings, like someone had been scratching at them. At the bottom, I found myself in a small, hidden room. It was cramped and reeked of something rotten. The floor was covered with old newspapers and dirty blankets, and in the corner, I saw it, a journal, pages torn and scattered. I picked it up, flipping through the yellowed pages. At first, it was normal, just notes about Mr. Whitman's daily life. But then the entries became darker. "I can't control it anymore," one of the last entries read. "The urges are stronger every day." My stomach lurched. I glanced around the room, realizing with horror that this was where someone had been living, watching, waiting. And then I noticed the chains on the floor, the scratches on the walls. Someone had been kept here. I ran back upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of there. But as I reached the front door, I heard the sound of a car engine. The van was back. I darted into a closet, barely breathing, and peered through the crack in the door. The men were back, dragging in more bags, heavy, dripping bags. I bit my lip to keep from gasping as they walked past me, not noticing I was there. They moved down into the basement, and I seized my chance. I bolted out of the closet and out the back door, running as fast as I could. I made it home, locking every door and window. But I couldn't stop shaking. I called the police, anonymously this time, and told them everything. They returned the next day. This time, they had a warrant. The news broke 2 days later. The police had found bodies, several of them, buried in the yard and hidden in the walls of Mr. Whitman's house. He had been a serial killer all along, preying on those no one would notice, keeping his victims in that secret room under the floor. The men I had seen were his accomplices, helping him cover his tracks after his disappearance. It was horrifying. The entire neighborhood was in shock. But the worst part came later that night. As I was locking up, trying to put the events behind me, I found something under my front door, a small piece of paper. It had just 2 words, "You're next." My blood ran cold. I checked the street, but no one was there. The van was gone, but the fear had settled deep inside me, and I knew this wasn't over.